Lagos, Nigeria. The city was alive with noise, flashing lights, and the hum of busy streets. Inside a grand mansion in the upscale part of Victoria Island, Victoria Jameson, one of the richest and most powerful women in Lagos, was sitting alone in her living room. She was in her late 30s, tall and beautiful with dark eyes that seemed to see everything. She had everything: wealth, power, and influence. But despite all that, there was something missing in her life. A deep loneliness she couldn't feel. Her mansion, full of expensive furniture and art, felt empty. And in that silence, she found herself thinking more and more about her cook, Naomi. Naomi was different from the people Victoria was used to. She wasn't a wealthy woman. She came from a small village, but she had this warmth about her that Victoria couldn't ignore. Naomi was young, kind, and always smiling. She'd been working for Victoria for 6 months, and over time, they began to form a connection. It wasn't just about the food anymore. It was the way Naomi made Victoria feel special in a way no one else could. Victoria had always kept her personal life private, especially when it came to her feelings. She wasn't used to letting people in. But Naomi had a way of breaking down her walls. One evening, after dinner, when the house was quiet and the staff had finished their work, Victoria sat down at the dining table, staring at her phone. She had been thinking about Naomi all day. She had tried to ignore the thoughts, but it was impossible. Naomi had become more than just an employee. She had become someone Victoria was drawn to, someone who made her feel alive. Naomi walked into the room carrying a tray with a cup of tea. She smiled at Victoria, but Victoria's heart raced as their eyes met. "Thank you, Naomi," Victoria said softly. She watched Naomi set the tray on the table. There was a moment of silence. Then Naomi hesitated before sitting down across from Victoria. They had never had this kind of moment before. But tonight was different. Naomi looked at her, her eyes nervous but full of something more, something unspoken. Victoria felt her pulse quicken. She didn't know what was happening, but she couldn't ignore it. "Naomi," Victoria began, her voice trembling slightly, "I don't know what's happening between us, but there's something about you. I can't explain it." Naomi bit her lip and looked away, clearly unsure. But then she looked back at Victoria, her eyes steady. "I feel it too, madam," she said quietly. It was in that moment that everything changed. The air between them thickened, and the room seemed smaller. There were no more words. Their gazes locked, and before either could stop themselves, they were moving closer to each other. Naomi's hand reached out, gently touching Victoria's. Victoria's heart was racing now. She knew this wasn't just a friendly touch. It was something more. Something dangerous. But she couldn't pull away. Naomi leaned in, and in a moment that felt both inevitable and forbidden, they kissed. It was soft at first, hesitant. But as their lips met again, it grew more intense. The world outside the mansion didn't matter. All that mattered was the connection they shared in that moment. The next morning, the reality of what had happened hit Victoria like a wave. She woke up with a sinking feeling in her stomach. What had she done? She couldn't believe it. Naomi, the woman she had trusted to cook her meals, to take care of her home, had become someone much more. Someone who had entered her heart and her life in a way no one ever had before. Victoria tried to push the thought away. She knew it was a mistake. She knew it could ruin everything she had worked so hard for. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Naomi's face. And it wasn't just the kiss. It was the way Naomi made her feel special, cared for, seen. Later that day, Naomi came to the living room to clean up. Victoria was sitting by the window, lost in thought. When Naomi entered, she stopped, standing there, unsure of what to say. The silence between them was thick with tension. Victoria stood up, turning to face her. "Naomi, we can't do this again. It was a mistake." Naomi nodded, her eyes downcast. "I understand, madam. I didn't mean for things to go this far. It just happened." Victoria could see the hurt in Naomi's eyes. She wanted to reach out, to tell her that it wasn't just a mistake for her. But she knew what the world would say, what people would think if they found out. It would destroy her reputation, her business, everything. As Naomi turned to leave, Victoria stopped her. "Wait." Naomi turned back, looking at her, waiting for what Victoria would say next. "I don't know what this means yet," Victoria said, her voice softer. "But I can't pretend like nothing happened." Naomi didn't respond. She simply nodded and left the room, leaving Victoria alone with her thoughts. Days passed, but the tension between them never went away. Victoria's feelings for Naomi grew stronger, but so did the fear that their affair would be discovered. Victoria's heart told her to follow her feelings, but her mind told her to stay away. She couldn't afford to lose everything she had worked so hard to build. Then one evening, everything came crashing down. It was a quiet night, and Victoria was having dinner alone when her phone rang. It was Michael, her best friend. She picked up the call, trying to sound calm. "Victoria, you need to be careful," Michael warned, his voice tense. "There's talk. People have been asking questions." Victoria's heart sank. "What kind of talk?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I don't know how, but people are starting to figure out what's been going on," Michael said. "The gossip is spreading, and it's only a matter of time before someone gets a picture or a recording." Victoria froze. The truth was coming out. She felt like the walls were closing in on her. "I'll handle it," she said quickly, but inside, she knew it was too late. The next few days were a whirlwind. The tension in Victoria's mansion had grown unbearable. She could barely sleep, her mind racing with thoughts of Naomi and the consequences of their actions. Victoria had always been in control, but now, she was spiraling. Her entire world felt like it was about to unravel. As the days passed, the rumors began to spread. Whispers in the city grew louder. People were talking, people who had seen Victoria and Naomi together, people who knew about their private moments. It wasn't long before an anonymous tip was sent to one of the major gossip websites in Lagos. The headline was shocking. "Powerful CEO caught having an affair with her cook." Victoria felt her heart drop as she saw the headline flash across her phone screen. The article detailed everything: their closeness, their secret moments in the mansion, and the rumors that had been swirling for weeks. It painted her as a woman with a hidden secret, someone who had crossed a line she couldn't return from. The world she had spent years building was crumbling before her eyes. Naomi had been in the kitchen when the news broke. She heard the muffled sound of Victoria's voice from the living room, but she didn't dare go near. She knew that the moment their affair was exposed, everything would change. Her heart was heavy, torn between guilt and the raw emotions she had been trying to ignore for so long. She couldn't deny it any longer, she was in love with Victoria. But Naomi had her own fears. She was a cook, a simple woman from a small village who had been thrust into this world of wealth and power. She didn't belong here. She didn't belong to someone like Victoria. Naomi feared that once the news spread, she would be discarded like a secret no one wanted to keep. Later that evening, after the gossip had spread like wildfire across the city, Victoria found herself sitting alone in the living room, the weight of the situation pressing down on her chest. Her phone was flooded with messages, some from concerned friends, others from people questioning her integrity. Then there was a knock on the door. Victoria's heart skipped a beat. She didn't need to look to know who it was. She stood up, walking slowly toward the door. When she opened it, Naomi was standing there, her eyes wide with worry. "Madam, I'm so sorry. I never wanted this to happen," Naomi said, her voice trembling. Victoria's heart ached. She wanted to comfort Naomi, but she knew that it was too late for comfort. They were no longer just two women sharing a moment of connection, they were now at the center of a scandal that threatened to destroy everything. Naomi stepped into the room, her eyes filled with tears. "I never meant for anyone to find out. I swear, I never wanted this to hurt you." Victoria reached out, gently placing her hand on Naomi's arm. "This isn't your fault," she said softly. "We both made choices. But we can't undo what's been done." For a moment, there was silence between them. The tension was thick, and neither of them knew what to say next. Then Victoria spoke, her voice low but firm. "We need to face this. There's no running from it anymore." Naomi nodded, wiping her eyes. "What will we do? What will the world say about us?" Victoria took a deep breath. "It doesn't matter what the world says. What matters is what we decide to do from here. I won't let this ruin you, Naomi." The room was heavy with emotion as they stood there together. In that moment, Victoria realized something that had been clear all along: this wasn't just about the affair. It was about the connection they had shared, the love that had blossomed despite the odds. And maybe, just maybe, this was their chance to rewrite the story on their own terms. The days that followed were filled with meetings, phone calls, and public relations nightmares. Victoria's company was under pressure to respond to the scandal. Her image, carefully curated for years, was being torn apart by the media. But through it all, she couldn't stop thinking about Naomi. The truth was, Victoria had fallen for Naomi. The affair had been more than a fleeting attraction, it had been real. Naomi made her feel human again. For the first time in years, Victoria was willing to be vulnerable, to let someone see her for who she truly was, not the powerful CEO, but the woman who longed for love and connection. Then, one afternoon, Victoria received a message. It was from Michael, her best friend. She had expected his usual warnings, his advice on how to handle the situation. But this message was different. "Victoria, you need to take control of your story. The world will judge you no matter what, but you can decide how they see you. Don't let them define you. It's time to be honest. Be brave." Victoria read the message over and over, the words sinking in. Michael was right. She couldn't keep hiding. She had to face the world, not just for herself, but for Naomi too. That evening, Victoria called a press conference. It was time to speak out. The conference room was filled with reporters, cameras flashing as Victoria stood at the podium, Naomi by her side. The room was buzzing with anticipation. The questions came fast and furious, but Victoria stood tall, her composure unshaken. She had nothing to hide. "I know many of you are here to talk about the recent rumors," she began, her voice steady. "Yes, they are true. I had an affair with my cook, Naomi Carter. But this is not something I'm ashamed of. Naomi is a remarkable woman, and we shared something that went beyond a workplace relationship. I know many of you may not understand, but I'm asking you to respect our privacy." There was a murmur in the room. The reporters were taken aback, but they had no choice but to listen. Victoria continued, her voice filled with conviction. "I know the consequences of my actions, but I will not apologize for loving someone. This is my life, and Naomi is a part of it. I will no longer hide who I am or who I love." Naomi stood beside her, her hand resting gently on Victoria's. There were no more secrets. No more hiding. After the press conference, things didn't magically get better. The media continued to dig, the rumors didn't stop, and people in Victoria's circle turned their backs. But for the first time in a long while, Victoria felt free. She was no longer trapped by the expectations of the world. She was living her truth, no matter how messy or complicated it was. As for Naomi, she had become more than just a cook. She had become Victoria's partner, her confidant, and the love of her life. Together, they would face whatever came next because no matter what, they had each other. And that, Victoria realized, was all that truly mattered.